Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, here to support you in overcoming disordered eating and finding peace with food. So today I'm going to talk about 5 emotions that drive binge eating. Now, this could also be relevant for driving chewing and spitting, emotional eating, overeating in general. But I'm going to be talking more specifically about binge eating, but I just want to kind of drop that in, I guess, that I think a lot of these things are going to be relevant across other disordered eating behaviours. Okay, so binge eating is not simply scoffing an extra biscuit with your morning coffee break. Instead, it involves eating fast an extremely large amount of food, more than you would eat for lunch or dinner, and usually in secret. And it can feel like a dissociative or out-of-body experience. You're fully present and grounded on earth, but it feels as if a demon has swept over you and taken all rational decision making away. So binge eating can be fleetingly euphoric and pleasurable, but this is short-lived before guilt, shame and self-loathing descend like a dark cloud. Plus, the physical consequences of feeling overfull are deeply unpleasant and sometimes painful. Now, binge eating can happen across the different eating disorders and within disordered eating. So you might have anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, or OSFED, other specified feeding and eating disorder, or you may not fit neatly into a diagnostic box. You might just be struggling with, but you might be struggling with disordered eating. Fundamentally, if you're binging and your symptoms are causing you distress, you are worthy of support and help. I think that's a really important thing. I think diagnoses have some benefit to a point, but actually at the end of the day, if you're binge eating, you're feeling out of control around food, if you're not in a great place, you are worthy of getting support. So the connection to your inner world. Your binge eating is often a symptom of inner distress, although this may be largely unconscious. Unexpressed and unfelt emotions ripple beneath the surface, and binging is a symptom of the deeper need. So these feelings are not getting your attention or airtime. You may be too busy and disconnected to be in touch with your body, and or any glimmer of feelings bursting through may feel wrong or self-indulgent. Perhaps you feel that others have it worse and you have much to be grateful for. What is there to worry about? But pushing down feelings doesn't make them go away. Try not to think about the pink elephant makes it more vivid and disruptive in your psyche. So you might feel very confused as you try to reconcile your emotional world with the more rational and logical part of yourself. You feel that many aspects of your life are smooth and controlled maybe. And maybe you feel that you know your voice and can assert your boundaries. You feel organised and in the driving seat, but not with food. And this is because there are parts of you that you are not allowing or acknowledging yet. But be really kind to yourself here, because I think this isn't a conscious thing and it can be painful to experience reality. And as a human, you will attempt to protect yourself and avoid. We all do this. We don't like to sit in the discomfort of our emotions. It's not an easy thing to do. So before delving into the most common hidden emotional triggers for binge eating, it's important also to address dietary restriction, because even if you're channeling emotional regulation tools with vigor and transforming towards your inner Zen state, food restriction alone is a ginormous binge trigger. So, I think if you're massively restricting, even if you're doing all the emotional work, you're still going to be stuck. So let's talk a little bit about dietary restriction before we get into the emotional triggers. So if you restrict your eating, your human survival instinct will drive you towards a primal desire to eat. Your hunger will be ferocious and feel out of control as you're designed to stay alive. A consistently hungry human is less likely to thrive and overcome adversity. And as hunter-gatherers, when we hadn't eaten for several days and then food was available, we would have filled our bellies to the brim and more. There would be no restraint or holding back. Getting fuel in the tank meant life or death. And we know from the Minnesota starvation study post-Second World War that when men were starved, they became very preoccupied with food and many started binge eating. The impact of hunger was described as devastating on mind and body. So restrictive eating will often inevitably lead to binge eating. So in today's world, restriction might involve not eating enough food, so maybe you're limiting your calories. It could be not eating enough variety of food. Maybe you're trying to be super healthy, you're cutting out carbohydrates or gluten or dairy, and then you're feeling physically and mentally deprived. It could be delaying eating till later in the day, so your hunger swallows you up in the evening. And it could be mental restriction, so you allowing yourself to eat sort of normally, and normally will mean different things to different people, but then you chastise yourself with a constant rhetoric of judgment and self-criticism. So you're basically running the diet talk kind of rhetoric, thoughts, feelings in the back of your mind all the time. So even though your outward eating with mental restriction might look like you're kind of eating normally, that you're not restricting yourself, because you're judging yourself so harshly, it really then impacts your eating. And that sheer intensity and inner emotional turmoil often causes overeating as a rebellious and self-sabotaging response, because if we've got this inner critic punishing us all the time, sometimes we just think, this is too much, I'm just going to eat anyway, 2 fingers up to it all. So it can be a combination of all 4, of not eating enough variety, delaying eating, and mental restriction. And in a world where thinness remains highly valued, restrictive eating can feel pure and seductive. The honeymoon of restriction often feels glorious and superior, but it's not sustainable. Restriction renders you extremely vulnerable to the backlash of binge eating. This is true for all body types, not just people who are thin or noticeably underweight. I'll say that again. This is true for all body types, not just people who are thin or noticeably underweight. I think a lot of people, if they are in a normal weight or an overweight body, they think, I can't be hungry, I can't be having these big cravings because of, my body just doesn't need it. Not true. So addressing dietary restraint. Be brutally honest with yourself about your restriction. Because I think a lot of people think, I'm not really restricting, because they look back to the olden days maybe where they were really restricting in a super severe way, and their restriction today doesn't look the same as that, so they tend to kind of gloss over it. But really be brutally honest, because if you're restricting, you will be binging. So, and you may not be restricting as you once did in painful days gone by. But if you're counting calories, you're missing out food groups or delaying eating, got that mental restriction going on, restriction is present. So work to reduce restrictive eating by eating enough quantity of food, eating regularly every 3 hours, eating from all the food groups, and also working to not forbid any foods. And you have to start with this with really baby steps to build slowly out of your comfort zone. Restriction can feel terrifying to let go of. So I think it's really important. Baby steps are really, really key. Not too much too soon. If you are massively triggered with binging with certain foods, you probably want to just only reintroduce those quite slowly, and you might need to do it with support. So start with baby steps, build slowly out of your comfort zone, because restriction can feel terrifying to let go of. And something I say to my clients all the time is, regular eating is the boring, unsexy, but fundamental work in addressing binge eating. So you want to focus on this first prior to tackling emotional triggers. And this then gives you a scaffolding of support to make other changes. Okay, so yes, you might have a lot of emotional triggers going on as well. But if you don't put your structured regular eating in place, and it is the boring, unsexy work, it's really hard to work on emotional triggers. Because just think about when we're hungry, how difficult it is to deal with any other emotion. Okay, so you want that stable body physiology to really help you have a strong baseline to work on your emotional triggers. And that's what I'm going to be talking about next. Okay, so let's move on to the 5 emotional triggers that I see most commonly that trigger binge eating. So number 1, boredom. So when you're in a binge restrict cycle, food has often become the pinnacle of pleasure and something to look forward to. You're counting down the hours and minutes until you're allowed to eat. Other self-care strategies have disappeared off the radar, and food becomes the turn to and guaranteed substance to offer stimulus and pleasure. Now, particularly as well, if you're neurodivergent, you might experience the need for food stimulus in a magnified way. The yum, the crunch, the texture, and distinct flavour of food can be exciting, punctuating the day with momentary satisfaction. And you might be someone who sets themselves momentous tasks with no planned break or relief along the way, and you expect yourself to push on through. I think this is really, really common with people with eating disorders. Often, set themselves like a massive task to do with no breaks. And of course, as a human, naturally boredom will display itself in these situations. We can't keep pushing ourselves. We need breaks. So actually, often you need a break or stimulus or change that may not always involve food. I mean, sometimes you may need to have a snack or something. Perhaps you've got hungry, but often we just need a break. We just need some stimulus. We need something else, but we often use food as the kind of quick turn to. So, action point here. Plan your day to include breaks and mini elements of self-care and stimulus, okay? Go outside for a 10-minute walk. Go and hang the washing on the line if you're at home. If you're at work, go for a quick walk around the block. Get up, walk away from your screen. Go and have a chat with someone for 5 minutes. Inspire yourself with other self-care activities apart from food, unless it's actually a scheduled meal or snack. So you want to be consciously and intentionally having your snacks and meals. You don't want to be missing those out, but you don't want to be mindlessly turning to food just because you're needing stimulus and a break. And think about utilizing the 5 senses in navigating alternative strategies. So consider sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. Okay, number 2, second emotion, anger. So people who binge eat are frequently super carers and responsibility holics. They're wonderful at supporting others and juggling many life roles. They're good listeners, they empathize with others, and they are great friends. And whilst it is wonderful to be kind, thoughtful, and helpful towards others, it's not helpful when you abandon yourself and it costs your mental and physical well-being. So binge eating is often an expression of a build-up of anger and frustration. Perhaps you feel that you cannot express these feelings openly to the people around you, as this brings up fear and guilt. So you stuff your feelings down with food, and you continue to please others and abandon yourself, and the cycle continues. And often this as well is quite unconscious. I think we often feel that we shouldn't feel angry, we can't feel angry, we're not justified for being angry, so we kind of push our anger down. So, action point here. Notice the parts of your life where you're people-pleasing and stuffing down anger. So work towards allowing your needs to be balanced into the equation. You don't have to become a selfish monster. It's about balancing the relationship to include the needs of others and to honour your needs alongside, not always sacrificing yourself. And understand as well, this is something that really helped me, that people-pleasing is not authentic. It is a survival strategy to protect yourself, but it doesn't allow others to see the real you, okay? Now, this can leave us feeling really, really lonely. If people only know the kind of the people-pleasing version of us, we feel really, really lonely and unseen. So if relationships are based on you suppressing your own needs, people are engaging then with a very one-sided version of you. And understanding this, definitely in my kind of healing journey, it really helped me significantly overcome people pleasing. I mean, it's something I'm still working on to this day, as being authentic is one of my highest values. I really wanted to feel that I'm showing up in relationships in a really, really authentic way and being genuine. Okay, the next emotion is shame. So if you experience feelings of worthlessness and inadequacy, believing there is something deeply wrong with you, then you are likely feeling shame. Shame causes you to withdraw and shut yourself away from others. You feel that there is something, really, really deeply wrong with you. And shame can be triggered by huge waves of self-loathing towards your body. And it can be set off by uncontrolled binge eating and the feelings of disappointment and failing that follow. And shame can follow if you feel that you've upset someone or done something wrong. And shame tends to descend as a dark cloud of self-loathing. You often become really dysregulated emotionally, and it sort of traps you, leaves you gasping for air almost. And before you know it, you might be turning to food to soothe and distract. So shame is a hard one. So action point. Appreciate that you're a human being with genuine strengths and weaknesses, as is every other human, okay? Start to notice when you're berating and punishing yourself intensely, because no one deserves this. Take a breath and a step back. You would never offer this level of condemnation and judgment to a friend, loved one, or pet. And shaming rarely brings about change. Realize that self-punishment only squashes motivation and leaves you feeling desperately hopeless. So instead, Take baby steps to offer yourself kindness and self-compassion with your words, thoughts, and behaviours. Gentle encouragement and support brings greater acceptance, which actually allows you to practice new ways of being. Like, we often think that beating ourselves up is going to somehow push us into change. It doesn't work. When we beat ourselves up, we feel really overwhelmed and hopeless and helpless. Actually, being kinder to yourself as you would to anyone else is much more motivating. Okay, number 4, anxiety. Anxiety causes you to what if about everything and catastrophize the future. You imagine all the possible scenarios that could go wrong, and you replay this over and over and over in your mind. Your breathing is shallow and you probably hardly catch your breath. You're disconnected from yourself, your wisdom, your body. So when you are feeling anxious, you're spinning on the hamster wheel of life at 200 miles an hour, both rushing and overthinking. You're not present in the moment. So you might not eat for hours as down rabbit holes of busyness. Then late afternoon arrives, you're over hungry, you're tired, you're depleted, and then you turn to food to distract and to temporarily escape planet Earth. So action point from this: work to slow down. Now, this sounds simple, but it's hugely challenging. I think when we're so conditioned to be like spinning so fast, slowing down can feel so wrong and unproductive and lazy. Okay, but it is not. We need to have some slowing down and rest to feel much more peaceful in our bodies, to regulate our nervous system. Prioritize as well your meals and snacks in your day. Okay, if you are just like missing meals because you're so busy and distracted, it's going to catch up with you. It's going to make you feel more anxious. Take mini breaks as well to pause and come back to yourself. Get up from the screen, go for the 10-minute walk, take some long, deep breaths. And think about the kind words that you would deliver to a friend in this situation. Okay, you are very good at being kind to others. You're just not so good at being kind to yourself yet. Okay, and the last emotion, guilt. The pursuit of a perfect or right way of eating is often central to the problem of binge eating, because you're chasing an ideal plan with distinct thoughts about healthy and non-healthy choices, and the rules are often overly strict and harsh. Then you don't meet the standards you set yourself, you feel intense guilt. And due to diet and wellness culture, there's a plethora of food information available about, what we should be eating, etc. And there is pressure to get it right and to eat optimally. Now, although nutrition is incredibly important for health outcomes, it's just one part of a larger pie. The psychological piece of the puzzle also needs addressing, including relationship with food. So, for example, intermittent fasting is currently popular and it works for some people, but for many, the restriction periods are often followed by binging, chewing, spitting, and other disordered eating behaviours. Now, this is not talked about in mainstream media and all the podcasts, etc. No one talks about the darker side, but I see the reality of this in my therapy room day after day. This is not life enhancing. It is damaging for mental and physical health. So we need to include relationship with food and psychology in the larger equation, balancing health with pleasure, satisfaction, and sustainable eating practices. So action point: recognize if you're pursuing perfect eating to the detriment of your relationship with food, and work to move away from black and white rigid rules. Be self-compassionate and kind rather than punishing and dogmatic. And think about a more balanced approach to health, including other variables, including movement, social aspects, relationships, spirituality, and self-care. Okay, so I hope you found this helpful. Do let me know if you relate. Do these emotions that I've talked about impact you and your relationship with food? Or are there other emotions that I should have included or that are really relevant for you? Do let me know. I would love to hear your experiences. Okay, so thank you so much for listening today. If you're not following me already, do seek me out on Instagram at @theeatingdisordertherapist_. And for further support with your relationship with food, do go to theeatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you enjoy this podcast, I'd be so grateful if you'd follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.